Prince Damrong Rajanubhab standard edition of 1917. As for Peter Skilling, well, how to introduce him, I don't know where to start, but I know he'd prefer me to be very brief. So I'll just say that he's one of the world's leading Buddhist scholars, one of the most renowned too, if not the most renowned. Any researcher or student on Buddhism has at one time or another, in my case many, many times, turned to Ajahn Peter. He has held various positions in several universities, for example in Sydney or here in Thailand at Chulalongkorn University. And above all, he was a professor at the École Française d'Extrême-Orient, the EFIO, an institution of which I have the honor of being a member, and from which Peter is now retired. Peter Skilling is also an honorary member of Siam Society, and among his countless publications, I will mention only the most recent, namely Questioning the Buddha, that contains translation of 25 sutras from the Konjur, that is the Tibetan Buddhist canon. And he has just published this year Buddha's Words for Tough Times, very relevant title, which translates 20 sutras from Tibetan and Pali. So these two eminent scholars are here with us this evening to present a recently published work of which they are the editors. This book is an English translation and annotation of the famous Nirat Nakhon Wat, or Journey to Angkor, published by Prince Damrong Rajanubhab following a trip he made to Cambodia in November and December 1924, that is, exactly a century ago. So tonight's date is no coincidence. So this journal had been published many times in Thai, but had never been translated into English. This has now been done thanks to the remarkable work of Bruce Evans. Bruce Evans, who is unfortunately not with us this evening, as he lives in Australia, is a Melbourne-born translator and editor. He is best known for translating texts and works by Ajahn Chan, whose teaching he followed as a Buddhist monk in Thailand until 1992. So I leave it to Ajahn Chris and Ajahn Peter to tell you all about Prince Damrong's journey to Angkor, but I can resist pointing out, by way of a conclusion, that in addition to his daughters and several Bangkok notables, the prince was accompanied on his journey by Georges Coedès. And as you may know, Georges Coedès was a French historian who began his career at an early age with the EFIO in Cambodia. He translated his first inscription when he was only 18 years old. In 1917, Prince Damrong invited Georges Coedès, whom he had met on 2 occasions, to move to Bangkok and work with him at the Vajrayana Library, which is the forerunner of the National Library of Thailand. Georges Coedès stayed with the prince for almost 13 years, during which time they carried out numerous field missions, including the one to Cambodia, which we'll be talking about tonight. Prince Damrong Rajanubhab and Georges Coedès' collaboration gave rise to a significant number of writings and scholarly works that contributed to the development of historical knowledge on Siam, about Siam and neighboring countries. It also gave rise to new approaches and perspectives that contributed locally to the emergence of the historical discipline in Thailand in its modern form. In January 1929, Georges Coedès was appointed director of the EFIO and had to leave Bangkok for Hanoi, where the French institution headquarters were located at that time. But even long after his departure from Siam, Prince Damrong and Georges Coedès continued to maintain friendly relations, as can be seen from their correspondence. Last May of this year, in the presence of Her Royal Highness Princess Sirinthaorn, we organized a symposium in Paris dedicated to the 2 scholars, Georges Coedès and Prince Damrong, where Chris Baker gave a remarkable presentation. I am therefore particularly pleased to be able to attend this reading this evening, which echoes that event and pays tribute to the extraordinary personalities of Prince Damrong Rajanubhab and George Coedès, whose humble heirs and successors we strive to be. I thank you very much for your attention, and I leave now the floor to Chris Baker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for so many people for coming. The one thing Gregory forgot to do was to introduce himself. This is Gregory Korulski, who's from the EFEO and who is also a member of the Siam Society Council. Now, can I... This mouse never doesn't work. Okay, got it. Okay, done. Got it. Okay. This film takes about 20 minutes.
I'd heard it told a long, long time ago by those who've visited Cambodia. The monuments are well worth a view, so huge and grandly built in ancient time. The craftsmen Khmer are expert carving stone in motifs manifold and intricate. They urged us on, do go and see them too. But duties, business all got in the way. I had to scrap appointments, burn them all, so that this year of rat, a window loomed to go to Angkor Wat, this present time. Prince Damrong Rajanubhab travelled to Angkor in November-December 1924. He was 62 years old. He chose to call his account of the journey Nirat Angkor Wat, where Nirat is a Pali Sanskrit word meaning loss, which became the title of a genre of Thai poetry very popular in the 19th century, in which a poet undertakes a journey and laments the separation from a lover left behind. It was later used for any poems about travel, and here, I think for the first time, for a prose work on travel too. In a preface in verse, Prince Damrong explained that he was thinking about returning with gifts. Because my friends are many, 100 plus, to give to all would be beyond my means. A better course, compose a Nirat ode, relating all about Cambodia for all my band of bosom friends to hear, then print and hand them out just like a gift. I think that most would find this to their taste. But all in verse would be beyond my power. As I'm not skilled at verse, it would not flow. I think I must compose in prose alone, with just a little verse to show the flag. The first printing, titled as an edition for gifting, appeared in March 1925, just 3 months after his return. The publisher asked to print again for sale. Prince Damrong made a few corrections, and the commercial edition appeared a year later and was very popular. In 1938, the Ministry of Education printed an edition for use in schools, and Prince Damrong added a small passage. The book remained constantly in print. These early editions had only a handful of illustrations. In 2002, the Prince Damrong Foundation published a new edition through the Matichon Group, including 80 photos, mostly taken by Prince Damrong's party or presented to Prince Damrong by the Résidence Supérieure. Over 20 years ago, the Pali scholar Peter Skilling had one of his pupils, Bruce Evans, translate the book into English, and recently asked me to edit and complete the work. Here it is, published by River Books on the centenary of the original journey. Prince Damrong had travelled a lot inside Siam, but rarely outside. This was his first trip after his retirement from government service a decade earlier. and was followed by a trip to Burma in 1936. Prince Damrong was accompanied by 3 of his daughters, Momjao Pun Pisamai, Patanyu, and Pillai Lekha. These 3 regularly accompanied him on his journeys. All 3 were then in their late 20s. There were then 4 attendants, Sambun Chotichit, who probably took dictation of the journal on which the book was based, Luang Suryapong, a doctor, Paya Potpricha, and Det Kongsai Sin, a valet, who does not appear in this or most of the photos, probably because he was taking them. The 9th member was Professor George Coedès, recruited 5 years earlier by Prince Damrong to be chief librarian of the Capital Library, the precursor of the Thai National Library, who came as a guide. They sailed on a steamer belonging to the East Asiatic Company, which detoured from its usual route to Singapore to deliver them to Kep. The steamer was sunk by Allied bombing in 1945 and is now a famous dive site off Sattahip. They departed on 16 November 1924, landed at Kep and drove to Phnom Penh, where they spent 3 days. Then went by boat through the Tonle Sap to Siam Reap, toured Angkor for 10 days, travelled by boat and car back to Phnom Penh, took a side trip to Saigon, then returned by the same route to arrive in Bangkok on 14th of December, in total about a month. Part of the excitement for them as tourists was travelling by car. At that time, there were no roads leading out of Bangkok. Only in 1931 were roads constructed to Nonburi and Samut Pragan, each about 20 miles. The elite brought motor cars, but they were used mostly for cruising gently round the Dusit quarter of the capital, more status symbol than transport. Prince Damrong had heard that cars could be driven fast on the open roads in Cambodia, and he was a little scared at the outset and asked for the drivers to slow down. But he soon got used to the speed, and he recorded in his journal the great distances covered. Although he had retired from government for a decade, he had not lost his instincts as an administrator. In his journal, he related at some length not only the technical details of how roads were constructed in Cambodia, along with the special problems created by the climate, terrain, and bullock carts, but also he detailed the administrative arrangements and the allocation of work that lay behind this construction. At Siem Reap, the party stayed at the Hotel Angkor, situated along the moat around Angkor Wat, and run by Messagerie Fluviale, the shipping company. The hotel had around 15 rooms on a single story, and Prince Damrong described it as well appointed and comfortable with both running water and electricity. The food was not bad, but the price, he thought, was a little steep. Among other guests was an American film crew, and Prince Damrong may have appeared as an extra in the background of some early Hollywood film. A group of 4 Egyptian princesses was due to arrive as he was departing. Prince Damrong had written a lot on monuments in Siam. He started his account of Angkor. I will simply state how seeing the actual temples differed from my prior expectations. First, it was more colossal than I had expected. Second, it was more magnificent than I had expected. He was impressed. They spent 10 days visiting the monuments, ranging farthest afield to the Lole group and Bante Samre, but mostly around Angkor Wat and Angkor Thom. They travelled mostly by car, but occasionally by bullock cart. They clambered up many flights of steps. Prince Damrong wrote, if one slipped and fell, there was a good chance of breaking one's neck. One has to use both hands and feet to climb up and down the steps. In fact, one almost has to crawl up the steps and then crawl down. He described each monument in the journal, probably dictated at the end of each day. He also summarized his impressions. Following the wisdom of the time, he argued that the Bayon was dated to the 9th century, much earlier than Angkor Wat, and had originally been Hindu, the face being Shiva. But even as he was touring around the monuments, research by Philippe Stern in Paris and Henri Parmentier at Angkor was undermining this chronology. 2 years later, Henri Marchal, who conducted Prince Damrong's party around Angkor, made excavations that confirmed a new chronology. And in 1928, Georges Coedès reread the inscriptions and gave his blessing. The Bayon dates to the reign of Jayavarman VII at the end of the 12th century, later than Angkor Wat, and the faces are the Buddha. This revised chronology still holds today, but Prince Damrong did not revise his account. He sensed that the major monuments such as Angkor Wat were memorials and reliquaries associated with the funerary traditions of kings. He realized that the crematory pavilions for Thai kings derived from the architecture of Angkor. He noted that Baksay Jamrong resembled a crematory urn and asked, could it be that this tradition of placing bodies of deceased kings in urns dates back to the time of Cambodian power in Angkor Thom? He was fascinated by the changes in the religious affiliations of buildings. He argued that Angkor had first been Mahayana, then Shaivite, then Vaishnavite, and that the transitions had not been conflictual, simply shifts in beliefs. He concluded his summary. No matter what image you form from reading about the monuments, it falls far short of the experience of actually going to see them for yourself. Prince Damrong told the French that his visit was a private affair, but of course that could not be, because of who he was, and because the relations among Siam, Cambodia, and France were so complex and fragile. Like many close neighbors, Siam and Cambodia simply have too much history. Angkor was the most advanced early culture in the region, and from there, art, architecture, dance, language, and statecraft flowed into early Siam. But when Angkor declined, Siam rose as a commercial and military power with ambitions to dominate its eastern neighbor. In 1794, a new Cambodian dynasty was installed from Bangkok, and they allowed Siam to take control of the province of Battambang, including Angkor. King Sisawat, who welcomed Prince Damrong in Phnom Penh, had been born and brought up in Bangkok, educated alongside the Siamese royals. After the French imposed a protectorate over Cambodia in 1863, Siamese influence was not immediately supplanted. But after King Sisawat came to the throne in 1904, Cambodia became effectively a French colonial territory, and France forced Siam to give up Battambang in 1907 and also Chantaburi. These events lurk in the background of Prince Damrong's account of their short stays in Phnom Penh at the beginning and end of the journey. They have several meetings with King Sisawat, a private audience, a drama performance, and a tea to allow Prince Damrong's daughters to meet their Cambodian counterparts. These affairs are rather stiff. Prince Damrong had brought along his formal dress and regalia, and was careful to follow details of protocol. His exchanges with King Sisawat echo with diplomatic nicety. At the same time, Prince Damrong's account of these days constantly recalls Siamese influence over Cambodia in the recent past. He meets many people, royals, nobles, officials, monks, consorts, who speak to him in Thai, learnt during time spent in Bangkok or under Siamese administration. Several of the royal princes the princesses have Thai mothers. He describes in great detail the royal palace of Phnom Penh, built by Sisawat's predecessor Norodom, as a close copy of the Bangkok Grand Palace, including the adjacent Wat Phra Kaew with murals of the Ramakien and an emerald Buddha. Perhaps Prince Damrong was indulging in some nostalgia, but perhaps he was also thinking of the book's main audience, the elite of Bangkok. He praises Khmer architects and craftsmen for following Thai models, but he chides them for their mistakes. The main audience hall is an imitation of an imitation, a mess. The ceremonial umbrella there is too high. In the Ramakien murals, the artwork is poor and not worth looking at. The image in Wat Phra Kaew is clearly a copy of the Emerald Buddha in Bangkok, but the colour is wrong. In the Thai play performed for their benefit, the dancing was comparable to that in Bangkok, and some of it was praiseworthy, but the female costume did not look good, as one shoulder was left bare, revealing the armpit. Perhaps Prince Damrong was telling his Bangkok audience that though Siam had nothing to rival Angkor in the ancient past, Siam was now clearly superior to its neighbour. Relations with the French were no less delicate. Both France and Britain had threatened Siam in the high colonial era. France had dislodged the Siamese from Battambang and Angkor only 17 years before this journey. The European powers had lost their enthusiasm for colonialism over the First World War, but the past remained the past. Prince Damrong stated that he had intended to simply travel round independently, but in practice, the Résidence Supérieure curated the whole trip. He hosted them at his house in Phnom Penh, provided the cars, orchestrated their tour of Phnom Penh, accompanied them part of the time in Siem Reap, attended their audiences with King Sisawat, and took them on a side trip to Mount Bogor during their return leg. Outside the capital, the party was passed on from one province's résident to another. The scholar Suzanne Carpeles, then employed by EFEO, accompanied them from their landing at Kep onwards. So did Lieutenant Gournay, an aide-de-camp. Henri Marchal, conservateur at Angkor, guided them around the monuments. There must be a large and interesting file on the trip in the colonial archives. Prince Damrong stuck to proper diplomatic protocol. He has no discussion of politics in the book, though his meetings with Cambodian royalty and officialdom are open to political interpretation. He fended off journalists who had political questions. He does not comment on colonial rule, though he showed an administrator's appreciation of some of its achievements. When asked for a title for this talk, I included raconteur because it scans well, and it would mean I have at least one French word. But Prince Damrong is not really a raconteur, a teller of tales, but rather a collector of information, a harvester of knowledge. In the course of this trip, he always asked about a whole range of subjects and recorded his findings in this book, including the recent history of the Cambodian royal family, the names of all 21 buildings in the royal palace, the royal regalia, the directory of Cambodian ecclesiastical titles and the organization of the Sangha, annual royal ceremonies, the procedure of the royal Gatin presentation, including the scripts of blessings, a list of royal decorations, the reliquaries of past kings, the history of the Royal Cambodia Theatre Troupe, the curriculum of monastic school, ranks of Cambodian princes, and a list of ministerial positions. Also, in passing, he gave his own detailed description of the construction and monuments on the Phnom Penh reliquary, the techniques of administration, of road construction, the buildings of Wat Phra Kaew, the origins of the Phra Kring amulets, trade of Saigon, the story of the Bishop of Adon, the activities and finances of the Saigon Opera House, and Cambodian musical instruments. In these notes and records, there is a very clear emphasis on the history, culture, and practices of Cambodian monarchy, including its relationship to the Buddhist Sangha. I was struck by the similarity to the Khamhaigan, the testimonies taken down from Ayutthaya nobles swept away to Burma in 1767. They also deal with the history, culture, and practices of the Thai monarchy. Did Prince Damrong's choice of Nirat, loss for this work, have an extra layer of subtlety? Was he thinking, perhaps unconsciously, on the one hand of the fall of Ayutthaya and the loss of knowledge which that entailed, and on the other hand about the fragility of Asian monarchy in the context of colonialism and the coming of the modern world? What then does this book tell us about the theme of this symposium, the relationship between Prince Damrong and George Coedès? Sadly, rather little. These 7 passages are all the mentions of Coedès, other than simple travel arrangements. Prince Damrong related that Coedès offered his surmise about the reliefs on the terrace of the Leper King, and we can be sure that he offered similar surmises throughout the tour of the monuments. But Prince Damrong, in his role as a diarist, confines himself to his own descriptions and opinions. Journey to Angkor is a rare account of an Asian royal tourist confronting the ancient history of Angkor against the background of the historical complexity of Thai-Khmer relations and under the shadow of late colonial rule. Perhaps Prince Damrong's choice of Nirat for the title has more resonance than we might initially think. Perhaps there is a theme of loss, both ancient and modern, threaded through this detailed and intense account of a unique journey made a century ago.
Oh, it works. That's great. Okay. Okay. As Gregory also has already said, in May of this year, this fine event was held in Paris to celebrate the relationship between Prince Damrong and George Coedès. It was attended by the princess and Narisa, the publisher of the book from River Books, who is here tonight, took the opportunity to present her with a copy. It was attended by several luminaries. These are the grandsons of the principals. These are the grandson of George Coedès and the grandson of Prince Damrong, who gave talks about their grandfathers at the event. And then there were several other people known to the Siam Society who also appeared at this event. As noted briefly in the video, and so at the last moment I couldn't go. I was invited, I couldn't go. So I made that with the help of Insomniac Productions, I made this video very quickly and sent it off. It came out incredibly well. So by pure jam. This was the first edition, and in 1925, and of which we have a copy in the library upstairs. And it's on the cover page. It says this is the issue for gifting to his friends, and he gave a talk here. He gave a talk in the Siam Society on July 28th, 1925, printed in JSS, and then he added a couple of things from that into the commercial edition that was produced a year later. And then, because then we printed by lots of different publishers in the time to come, but only here, and this is 20 years ago in 2002. Matichon published a version, and this is the first one that had lots of the photographs in, and the photographs are rather special. And as also Bruce Evans has translated this. So I'd now like to invite Peter to come and say something. Okay? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so good evening. Thank you all for coming. I really think this video is excellent. I'm sort of speechless when I see it. And it's really wonderful to have this book out in English. And so I'm very grateful to Narisa and River and her press for publishing it. Now, Chris mentioned that I encouraged actually not a pupil, a colleague, Bruce Evans, to translate it. So I reflected on this because I'm not a historian of Thailand. I don't specialize in Thai studies. My main field is, in fact, Buddhism and Indian Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. So I was thinking, why was I reading this book? Because that I can remember. I had been reading this book and I thought this should be translated. Other people should be able to enjoy it too. Why? Well, because you can see from Chris's video and from his talk that it is in fact a wonderful book full of knowledge. And it remains a resource of, now I am even more aware as time goes by, that was another era. And I think how the Siam Society and this Soy Asok must have been then, and what we see here now. Hundreds of people walking by in a rush, constant traffic jam, and so on. So this was really another world you can see, and also Chris pointed out, this was the beginning of the motor car. Well, I won't talk about the problems of motor cars. That's tedious, but so there are many aspects about what is history. Well, it can sometimes be indulgence of delving into the past. And that was one of the things. I was primarily very much interested in the information about Buddhism. The lists of the Sangha administrations, the curricula, the rituals, and other points, which is not actually what the book is about, I guess. But there is a lot of information. That was one of the strong points. But so why was I reading it? I also realized when I picked it up, I actually picked up this very nice newer edition, that it is beautifully written. I'm not a Thai specialist in Thai literature, but I will humbly say that it is exquisitely written book. And that impressed me too. And so I approached my colleague Bruce Evans, and this was something new to him. He was very good in northeastern Thai, Isan, and in the monastic language. I should have a picture, but I'm afraid I don't. His latest book, came out about the same time, is a translation of Paul Payutto's book, Puttatam. Somewhat abridged translation, but still massive. Perhaps 800 pages. It's a work of love, and a beautiful book to learn about the depth and breadth of Buddhist thought, and to have the interpretation of a great Thai monk scholar. So I think we are all lucky, fortunate to be, to have these contacts with these great scholars, masters of language, masters of knowledge. Prince Damrong, of course, and George Coedès too, and many of the Khmer experts, scholars, and royal members of the court as well. And then in modern times, Bruce has drawn on, benefited from, and is sharing the Thai Buddhist tradition of several great speakers. Ajahn Chah, with whom he studied in Ubon, was not a scholarly person, but he gave extraordinary sermons, language from the heart. And then, of course, Po Payutto is very well known for his scholarly books, which are also from the heart. I would say Prince Damrong's book also was written from the heart. And so it's a very great pleasure for me. It took a little while, 20 years or more, for various reasons, mostly my own inefficiency. But after Bruce finished it, then one of the problems was spelling the titles. Transliteration of Thai, which is often, full of Pali and Sanskrit loan words, is always difficult. And then we have the difficult fact that the Khmer and the Thai use often the same titles, but pronounce them differently. So we had to balance that to give justice, let's say, to both ways of interpreting what is yet a third language, an Indic language, Pali and Sanskrit. So that was one of the problems. Another was identifying the French officials. As Chris mentioned, Prince Damrong was taken care of by the French officials, the Résidence Supérieure, and he gives the names only in Thai transcription. So to find out what their name properly was in French, was another of the chores. These kind of things sort of intimidate me, and I didn't get very far with arranging it until Chris Baker very kindly accepted my invitation to help edit it and to take care of these things, which he did very well. He knows the right people, how people take care of these things, so that I think it now reads very well as an authoritative testimony of this remarkable journey 100 years ago. I would like to say briefly that Prince Damrong's books are wonderful to read in Thai, and I hope more of them will become available in English or other European languages, because we lack English or other literature on the intellectual traditions, intellectual history of modern or modernizing Siam. So if you can read Thai, it's wonderful, because there are many good writers and many interesting things. If you can't, that's a problem, because now everything is sort of oversimplified into computer speak and brochure speak and tourism speak and so on. And to see the depth, the sensitivity, the cultural knowledge of Prince Damrong, who, I don't know, I read a lot of colonial literature from India, British colonial literature, and they were master scholars and sympathetic scholars in colonial India, but Prince Damrong is right up there with them, and perhaps surpasses them in the way he handles these delicate diplomatic questions. So, don't think I have much more to say here. I'm sorry I don't have a nice video to show you or a PowerPoint, but I do hope those of you who are interested will buy or at least somehow read the book. And I'm very happy that it's finally out after this long period, beautifully produced, a nice light book, light in weight, but lovely in design. And I'm very grateful again to Narisa for her publication of it, her support of this publication, and in general, as a book lover, I think there are a few here amongst us. It's very nice to have this tradition, to have this come out 100 years later, this testimony of a great Thai scholar. So thank you very much.
How much time have we got? 10 minutes? Sorry? 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Okay. I just want to add a couple of things onto bits that were mentioned in the video. The three daughters of Prince Damrong, very interesting. In all, he had 37 children. And these were the 11th, 12th, and 14th. And that's quite moderate by the standards of this family. You have to recognize that at that time. And these, they seem to have traveled with, they were sort of favorites of a sort, and traveled with him a lot on his journeys all around. On what Peter was just saying about how nice this book is to read, particularly in Thai, this is really quite remarkable. Because it is clearly produced from a journal. He was clearly doing all this travel and walking around these monuments. He was going back in in the evening, and then he was dictating. Right? And I think to the man over on the left-hand side, he's described as a Samian, so I think he is the scribe. So, and he then produced the book 3 months after he came back. Now, we're not thinking about today, when you have it in computer and you do it and it goes to print, you have to typeset, right? So the amount of time he must have taken in revising when he came back was very, very, very short indeed. It must have gone down almost perfect from the first moment. The other thing I'm going to mention that the last member, the fourth member of his entourage, go back there, yeah, dead. Kong Sai Sin, who doesn't seem to appear anywhere, but I think it's him up there in the top left corner. He appears in almost none of the photographs, so I think he's taking them. Unfortunately, there's no description about camera equipment and things like that, which is something of a pity. Now, this I'm going to skip because it repeats, except to say that this. How do I get this to point? Yes, you see this. If you go back, this shows. This is in, I think, 1879. I think. And Siam is stretching right down here, and Cambodia has been to that small. If you overlay the current map of Siam on there, you can see that this is the bit which was taken from Siam by the French between 1904 and 1907. Okay? And that was the great resentment that is sitting there in the background of this visit. These are the same, which I showed earlier, so I'm going to skip these. This is a very nice picture of the French, particularly the EFEO, entertaining Prince Damrong and his party to tea with the backdrop of the Bayeux, which I think is really a splendid photograph. And I'm going to skip this bit too on Sisua. And it's noticeable that he takes almost the same amount of time describing the palace in Phnom Penh, which is a copy of the palace in Bangkok, as he takes describing Angkor Wat. Yeah? And he is so impressed that they've taken the trouble to copy it. He's very flattered, if you like, by this copying. But then he's picky. He wants to be superior, so he criticizes them for getting this wrong, the color wrong, this is right, the umbrella is too high, and so on and so forth. So there's this there's always this very complicated relationship between Khmer and Thai, between Cambodia and Siam, which is the same as between siblings who just simply have too much DNA, which is the same. Because everything, the culture, the language, the dance, the music, whatever, is completely shared between these two adjacent areas, which have now got separated into nationalities, but actually share so much that there is a rivalry over ownership of this shared heritage, and this keeps, of course, breaking out in various ways to this day, right now, about areas of the sea, but it's exactly the same. Just repeat some of these photographs, these very nice ones of them sitting on the terrace, which is not probably what should have been done. Most of the photos are, in fact, tourist snaps rather than scholarly snaps. They are, selfie-type ones, or they're groups in various different places. Some, however, are still very interesting, because if you take the old version and then you put it next to how the monument looks today, 100 years later, they can be really quite interesting. And similarly with the terrace of the Leper King, actually it looks almost exactly the same. There's almost nothing that's been changed there. And Pimayan Agar, the Sky Palace, again, if you go back and forth, it's hardly there at all. he has only a few photos which show anything outside these kind of rather touristy snaps. This is the only one which shows the French at work on the restoration, working on one of the gateways in Angkor Thom. This is the only one taken inside one of the colonnades. He has no pictures, for instance, of the bas-reliefs at all. This is a rightly famous picture. It's one of the few that went out into the public domain early on. There's 3 or 4 which went out. And if you look at it on Google, you'll find that this is described as Prince Damrong climbing up. But you only have to look at it to realize that figure is really not heavy enough to be Prince Damrong. It's one of his party, but not Prince Damrong himself. Sorry. And on the way back from Angkor, they stopped off in various different places, and this is rather nice when you have to look very carefully. But over here, there's a sort of local dance performance going on, and they just chanced upon it in some village on the way and stopped to look at it for a time. This is the waterfront in Phnom Penh, and you can see it's got houseboats for living and probably for shopping along the riverside in the same way that you had in Bangkok at that time. And this is the Great War Monument, which no longer exists. So I thought I'd show it again. It was knocked down by the communist government. And this is, I think, an absolutely lovely photograph. It's crossing the Basak River on the way out. It's splendid to see this extremely expensive motor car sitting there on this extremely fragile looking raft to go across the river. Very exciting journeys. There's then a couple of photos which, if we look at them, the modern equivalent, we can see there's been really very little change. The Opera House in Saigon is almost exactly the same as it sits there. But some that have changed an enormous amount. This is Mount Bogor, which is down near Kep on the coast, which they've visited on the way back, and where they were building this very grand hotel in which François Baudouin, the Résident Supérieur, had a financial interest, and it became a big scandal. You can read about it later, and it never got finished. And it's now, I think, being refurbished at the moment. This is not part of this journey, but it's such a nice photo, I have to show it. This is actually 2 or 3 years later than that, taken in Bangkok, showing Prince Damrong with his daughters and George Coedès with his daughters as well. And his wife is a very interesting lady, which, as far as I can work out, no one has done proper research. She was the daughter of a very high-ranking Cambodian noble. Coedès married her very shortly after he arrived in Phnom Penh. And it must have been somewhat scandalous, because this is the time of high colonialism, and this sort of mixed marriage at that time must have been looked down upon by the typical colonial French. He had, I think, in total, 5 children, including a son who became an admiral in the Cambodian Navy. But I think his reaction against what may have been the criticism he got was that he married her 3 times. He married her first in the local ceremony, and later in a French ceremony, and later in a church. I think there's a lovely story there that I don't think anyone has properly told yet. And lastly, I just want to show you the picture that was used on the cover. And before I do that, I must say thank you to several people who helped on this book. As Peter said, we were able to trace down many of the French colonial officials and others who are mentioned in the book, and that was done by Leah Genovese, who is here. She found those all out for us. Several of the photos, apart from the ones taken by the trip, came from the collection of old postcards of Dawn Rooney, who is here tonight, and the issues of Khmer and transliteration were done for me by Trent Walker, the great Khmer scholar Trent Walker. But lastly, just to confirm with Peter our thanks of the whole team to the great work that River Books did on this, and to show you just this, the cover photograph. This is the original, and after Fon, who does the layout work for River Books, I'd worked it, it looks like that. Isn't that lovely? Okay, thank you very much.
So thank you very much to both of you. It was very interesting. We have only time for just a couple of questions, if I may. So does everyone have a question for Dr. Chris or Dr. Peter? Wow, the first time no one has a question. It was so complete. So maybe I have one, just one for conclude. I was wondering whether, because I was also surprised that Prince Damrong was himself struck by the similarities between Siam and Cambodia, but today, I mean, it's quite obvious. Everyone acknowledges that how much the Khmer, how the Thai culture is indented or related to the Khmer culture. So it seemed that at that time it was something that was forgotten, or because in 19th century, for instance, like the law, the Kot Mai Tala Sam Duong, it's obviously related to some Khmer culture, even the script. So at what time the Siamese or the Thai just forgot that they were related to Khmer culture? Do you have an idea about that or comment?
You know, I don't really know if there's a simple answer to that. But I think I would say only that there is an obvious tendency in Siam amongst the elite in general in the second half of the 19th century in particular, when they are coming to terms with the West and with the modern world, to look inwards, you know? To look and not so much to look outwards and compare themselves, and particularly not to look outwards to their neighbours. This is a reminder to take a pill. So I don't think it's specific to Prince Damrong. And as he says elsewhere in the book, it wasn't surprising. The monuments weren't surprising because he'd seen books. He'd seen lots of books. He'd read lots of books on them. So that wasn't so much a surprise. And it was a disappointment of mine that I couldn't find out what books he had read. The Prince Damrong Library, which is down on Lan Luang, in the past, I went to work there over 10 years ago, they had their cataloguing of their earliest books were in ledgers, and they just written as the books arrived. They wrote them down. So all the books on Khmer were written down like this. So I was hoping that I could just go there and look before 1924 and we'd be able to see what books he had read. Unfortunately, they've modernized the reference system and thrown away the ledgers. So it was impossible to get to look at them.
So thank you very much again for everyone to have gone so numerous today, and thanks again to Ajahn Chris and Ajahn Peter. I think we can applaud again. Thank you very much.
Sorry if we have time for one more question. First of all, I want to thank you for this wonderful book. But I wanted to ask a question of one of Prince Damrong's other expeditions. And Chris, could you say something perhaps about his expedition to Khao Pravihan Prayavihir?
I mean, yes. Well, we know that there is the famous photograph that shows him approaching Khao Pravihan, and the French flag is flying there. And we know that it is on record that he asked permission of the French to make that visit. And these two facts became very important in the court case between Siam and Cambodia over who had control of Khao Pravihan. But I don't know anything else about it other than those simple facts. Oh, yes, okay, yes. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, just to add to this. Yes, there's a book called Temple in the Clouds, which goes through the whole case in quite a lot of detail. So if anyone's interested in that, we still have that. So it's... Thank you.
Yeah, I was asked to close this session, so if you have more questions, maybe you can ask Ajahn Peter, Ajahn Chris now and privately. Thank you very much.